After the death of her secretive mother, the funeral slowly reveals a family that was never meant to live normal lives. The film opens with the death of Ellen, a 78-year-old woman who passed away after a long illness. She leaves behind her daughter Annie, her husband Steve, and her two grandchildren, Peter and Charlie. Ellen's funeral is held the next day, attended only by close family. At the service, Annie delivers a brief speech, describing her mother as stubborn, secretive, and difficult to understand.
My mother was a very secretive. She was also incredibly stubborn, which maybe explains me.
Ellen lived a private life filled with strange rituals and unknown friendships. After the funeral, the family returns home. Annie, a miniature artist, spends her days creating detailed replicas of her family and their surroundings. While cleaning her workspace, she comes across a box containing her late mother's belongings. Inside, she discovers a book filled with notes on spiritualism. The first page contains a handwritten message from Ellen. She apologizes for everything she never explained, asks Annie not to hate her, and claims the sacrifices they made would one day be rewarded. Confused and disturbed, Annie puts the book away. As she prepares to leave the room, Annie notices a shadowy figure standing in the corner, shaped like her mother. When she turns the light back on, it vanishes. Shaken, Annie looks at one of her miniatures depicting herself breastfeeding, while Ellen stands nearby and quickly turns it around. The next day at school, a bird slams into a classroom window and dies. During recess, Charlie finds the bird's body and calmly cuts off its head. Across the street, a strange woman watches Charlie and waves at her, but Charlie doesn't recognize her. Back at home, past Ellen's old bedroom, when the door suddenly opens by itself. Inside, she finds a strange triangular symbol drawn on the floor. Disturbed, Steve later locks the room to keep anyone from entering again. Not long after, Annie attends a grief support group. There, she reveals her family's long history of tragedy. Her father starved himself to death. Her brother, diagnosed with schizophrenia, died by suicide after claiming their mother was trying to put someone else inside his body.
My older brother had schizophrenia, and when he was 16, he hanged himself in my mother's bedroom, and of course his suicide note blamed her, accusing her of putting Pete aside.
Annie admits she had a distant and complicated relationship with Ellen. Her mother was obsessively attached to Peter, which frightened Annie and caused her to keep him away. But when Charlie was born, guilt led Annie to allow Ellen full access to her, something she now regrets. Despite everything, Annie admits she did love her mother, even though Ellen was deeply manipulative. Later that evening, Peter asks to attend a party, lying to Annie by calling it a school barbecue. She agrees, but only if he takes Charlie with him.
Where are you going?
Oh, just like a school barbecue thing?
You gonna take your sister?
Outside, Charlie stares into the yard, where a figure sits silently inside a circle of fire. Moments later, Annie approaches Charlie and tells her she's going. Reluctantly, Peter takes Charlie to the party. While he socializes, Charlie stands alone and eats a slice of cake, unaware it contains nuts. Moments later, her throat begins to close. It turns out that Charlie has a severe nut allergy that triggers asthma. Panicking and unable to breathe, she rushes to Peter, who realizes too late what's happening.
Are you okay?
It's hard to breathe. I think my throat's getting bigger.
Without thinking, Peter grabs Charlie and rushes her to the car, desperate to get her to the hospital. During the drive, Charlie writhes in pain, gasping for air as Peter speeds down the road in panic. Suddenly, a dead deer appears in the middle of the road. Peter instinctively swerves to avoid it. At that exact moment, Charlie leans her head out of the window, struggling to breathe, when a utility pole strikes her head, killing her instantly. Peter freezes, unable to process what has just happened. He drives home in complete shock and guilt, unable to tell his parents the truth. The next morning, Annie discovers Charlie's headless body inside the car. Even after the funeral, Charlie's head is never found. Charlie's death devastates the family. Annie, overwhelmed by grief, channels her emotions into her art, creating a miniature recreation of Charlie's fatal accident. This enrages Steve, who cannot understand how Annie could recreate something so horrific. Annie calmly explains that this is how she copes, but her mental state continues to deteriorate. During a tense family dinner, Annie lashes out at Peter, blaming him for Charlie's death. Peter fires back, accusing Annie of forcing Charlie to attend the party in the first place. From that moment on, the family begins to emotionally fracture. While shopping for supplies, Annie unexpectedly runs into Joan, a woman she recognizes from the grief support group. As they talk, Joan reveals something deeply unsettling. She claims she can summon the spirits of the dead. Annie dismisses her at first, believing Joan is unstable, but Joan persists and eventually convinces Annie to visit her apartment. There, Joan performs a ritual, claiming to communicate with the spirit of her grandson. In front of Annie's eyes, a board and a glass begin to move on their own, as if something unseen is guiding them. Terrified and shaken, Annie leaves in a hurry. Before she goes, Joan gives her a piece of paper containing ritual instructions, explaining that Annie must recite the chant and ensure every family member is present. Back home, Annie can't stop thinking about what she witnessed. Later that night, she notices ants crawling through her bedroom. Following them, she sees a horrifying sight: Peter's severed head lying on the bed, covered in ants. Annie suddenly wakes up, realizing it was only a nightmare. Even so, the fear lingers. Not long after, she decides to perform the ritual herself, hoping to contact Charlie. Steve and Peter reluctantly join her. To Annie's shock, the ritual actually works. Overwhelmed with emotion, Annie believes she has summoned Charlie's spirit. But the situation quickly turns disturbing when Annie appears to become possessed, speaking in Charlie's voice. Terrified, Steve throws water on Annie, breaking the possession.
Mom? Mom?
I don't like this. Dad, I don't like this.
After this incident, Peter begins experiencing disturbing visions. He feels constantly watched and sees his reflection smiling at him when he is not. Meanwhile, Annie notices Charlie's sketchbook moving on its own, filled with grotesque drawings of Peter's face. Believing Charlie's spirit is responsible, Annie grows increasingly afraid. One night, Peter wakes up to a shadowy figure standing in his room. He feels an invisible force choking him. When he regains awareness, Annie is standing over him, making it appear as though she was attacking him. Annie insists she only came because she heard him screaming. Searching the sketchbook, she finds countless disturbing drawings of Peter. When she tries to burn it, her own sweater catches fire instead, as if the book is directly connected to her. Desperate for answers, Annie rushes to Joan's apartment, but Joan is gone. Instead, Annie finds a photograph of Peter, his face circled and placed inside a triangular symbol identical to the one from Ellen's room. The doormat outside Joan's apartment matches the ones Ellen used to make. Realizing only her mother could have made them, Annie searches the attic. There, she finds doormats bearing her family members' names and photographs, revealing Joan and Ellen were close. Annie also notices they wore identical necklaces. Annie finally understands the truth. Ellen was part of a cult worshipping the demon Paimon. The rituals were meant to summon him in exchange for wealth and power, and Ellen used her own family as sacrifices. Soon after, Steve receives an email stating Ellen's grave has been desecrated and her body is missing. He hides this from Annie. Later, Annie investigates a foul smell in the attic and discovers Ellen's decaying corpse along with symbols linked to Paimon carved into the wall. At school, Peter sits alone when Joan suddenly appears, chanting strange words at him.
Dagony! The Paragon!
During class, Peter becomes possessed, his eyes turning red as he violently slams his head against his desk, leaving him traumatized and terrified. After the incident at school, Steve picks Peter up and brings him home. Still in a state of panic, Annie tells Steve that Ellen's body is in the attic. He refuses to believe her at first, but when he goes upstairs and sees Ellen's headless corpse with his own eyes, the truth becomes impossible to deny. Instead of comforting Annie, Steve turns on her, accusing her of being responsible for bringing the body into the house. A violent argument erupts. Steve insists that Annie must have stolen Ellen's corpse from the grave, while Annie desperately tries to explain that their family is being cursed by her mother. She shows Steve Charlie's sketchbook and explains that the book is cursed. If it is burned, the person who burns it will burn as well. Steve dismisses her claims, convinced that Annie has completely lost her sanity. In desperation, Annie throws the sketchbook into the fire. To everyone's horror, Steve's body instantly bursts into flames, killing him on the spot. Annie stands frozen, her face empty with shock. Moments later, she appears to become possessed by an unseen force.
You are sick, Annie. I need to call the police.
Hours later, Peter wakes up and searches the house for his parents. Instead, he finds his father's charred corpse. As he looks around in terror, he notices a naked man standing silently in the corner of the room, smiling unnaturally. Soon after, Annie appears with a horrifying expression and begins chasing Peter through the house. Overcome with fear, Peter flees into the attic. From below, Annie violently slams her head against the attic door, screaming uncontrollably. When everything finally goes silent, Peter looks around and notices candles arranged in a circle, with his own photograph placed at the center. Looking upward, Peter witnesses something truly horrifying, Annie floating in the air as she slowly cuts her own throat. Terrified beyond reason, Peter jumps out of the attic window. He crashes to the ground below and appears to die instantly. Moments later, a strange glowing light enters Peter's body, bringing him back to life. Weak and disoriented, he stands up and sees his mother's headless corpse levitating toward the treehouse in the backyard. Unable to resist, Peter follows it inside. Inside the treehouse, Peter finds a group of naked cult members kneeling before a statue bearing Charlie's severed head. Joan steps forward and addresses Peter, calling him by a new name, Paimon. Peter is crowned and proclaimed King Paimon, chosen to replace his deceased sister. At this moment, Peter's soul is gone. His body has been completely taken over by the demon.
You are Paimon. We've corrected your first female body and give you now this healthy male host.
It is finally revealed that everything was meticulously planned by Ellen long before her death. As the leader of the cult, she intended to summon the demon Paimon into the physical world, but the ritual required a perfect vessel, a healthy male body whose original soul had been completely broken. Years earlier, Ellen attempted to use Annie's older brother. She drove her husband into madness and suicide to shatter her son's mind. Although it worked, Annie's brother ultimately refused to become Paimon's vessel and took his own life to stop her. When Annie later gave birth to Peter, Ellen tried again. However, Annie and Steve kept Peter away from her. When Charlie was born, Annie finally allowed Ellen to be involved in raising her. From infancy, Ellen exposed Charlie to Paimon's symbols, binding the demon to her. But Charlie's body was only a temporary vessel. Because she was female, Paimon could never fully inhabit her. The true goal had always been Peter. Ellen's death marked the beginning of the final phase. Charlie's death was deliberately orchestrated to transfer Paimon from her body into Peter's. The trauma shattered the entire family, weakening Peter's mind. Exploiting Annie's grief, Joan entered her life and gained her trust. The spirit summoning ritual was never meant to contact Charlie. It was designed to bring Paimon closer to Peter. Every chant, every instruction, every step unfolded exactly as Ellen planned. By the end, Peter's soul was completely destroyed, leaving his body empty and ready. With Paimon finally possessing a new vessel, the cult's goal is achieved. Ellen's ambition has been fulfilled, but at the cost of her entire family. The film ends with the demon crowned king and the cult rewarded with the wealth and power they were promised.